I mean, I can't listen to my own singing, but I mean, it's not a pop vocal, it's a bluesy. Perhaps it's not really what you'd expect. And I don't think the combination of the vocal very different in 1967. To me, it still sounds different today.
There are songs that require no introduction, just a few notes of an organ drifting in, just a raspy, haunting voice, and instantly millions of memories come flooding back, of love, of loss, of longing. We skip the light fandango. That voice belongs to Gary Brooker. And A Whiter Shade of Pale isn't just a song. It's a quiet manifesto of an entire generation, one that had loved, stumbled, and never stopped dreaming. Gary Brooker, singer, pianist, and the soul of Procol Harum, was never part of the noisy, flamboyant breed of rock stars. He didn't need blinding stage lights, didn't shout, didn't court scandal. All he needed was a piano, a microphone, and a quiet night to let his voice rise. In a rock world teeming with chaos and competition, Brooker chose to exist like a gentleman, humble, graceful, but always impossible to ignore. Since 1967, when A Whiter Shade of Pale shook the global music scene, and for over half a century after, his hair turning white but his fingers still dancing over the keys, Gary Brooker has never been forgotten. On the contrary, he is among the rare artists whom time cannot erase, because his music didn't chase trends. It reached for what lies beyond time itself: sorrow, beauty, solitude, and the yearning to be understood. But what lies behind that timeless hit and composed demeanor? A child who lost his father at age 11. A young man who dropped out of music school to follow rock. A man once sued by a former bandmate over the rights to the very song that made his name. And a husband who quietly spent over 50 years with the only woman he ever married, until the day he died. So who is Gary Brooker, beyond the voice of Procol Harum? He was an artist who never fought for center stage, because he was the center of every emotion. And his life story, though never loud, deserves to be told, with quiet reverence and deep respect. Early life. Gary Brooker was born on May 29, 1945, in Hackney, East London, right in the aftermath of World War II, when Britain was still blanketed in smoke and struggling through Reconstruction. His father, Harry Brooker, wasn't famous, but he was a true artist. A pedal steel guitarist, Harry had once performed with Felix Mendelssohn's Hawaiian Serenaders, a group that popularized Hawaiian music in Britain during the 1930s and 40s. He didn't just play instruments, he brought an entire world of music into their modest family home. In the quiet of post-war nights, his playing was a kind of sedative for the household. For young Gary, it became the first language he understood, before he was even fluent in speech. His mother, Violet May Brooker, was the quintessential strong woman. Quiet, frugal, and endlessly resilient. She cared for the family, managed every meal, and tried to maintain a simple, stable home, even when Harry's income as a performer was far from steady. Violet was one of those silent foundations behind creative men, never stepping onto the stage herself, but always present behind the lights. When Gary was 9, the family moved to Southend-on-Sea, a coastal town quieter than London, filled with sea winds, pub music, and docks shimmering with lights. But the calm didn't last. At age 11, tragedy struck. His father died suddenly of a stroke. That loss didn't just rob the family of its breadwinner, it shattered the rhythm of life they had only just begun to build. Violet, accustomed to staying in the wings, was now forced to work in a factory to support her son. And Gary, once a dreamy little boy, had to grow up faster than most kids his age. He began waking early to deliver newspapers, helping his mother make ends meet. And yet, amid the emptiness, music never abandoned him. On the contrary, it became his refuge. Gary continued learning piano without a formal teacher, and later picked up the cornet, trombone, and guitar. These instruments weren't just distractions. They became silent companions, shielding him like a father would, listening like a mother might, to emotions he never dared speak aloud. While other kids played football outside, Gary sat in tea rooms, performing with teenage bands. He attended Westcliff High School for boys, then moved on to South End Municipal College, where he studied zoology. But his heart was always elsewhere. Music called to him, more powerfully than any science ever could. Eventually, he was accepted into the prestigious Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. But his time there was short-lived. Brooker dropped out because he understood something many don't. To become an artist, you don't need a diploma. What you need is emotion, the kind he'd been gathering for years, through the loss of his father, the nights his mother stitched clothes beneath a yellow bulb, and the wordless loneliness he swallowed all throughout his childhood. Early career. While British bands were storming America with the British invasion in the quiet seaside town of Southend, a young man who had just dropped out of music school was piecing together his first band. Gary Brooker, only 17 at the time, had no reputation, no mentor, just a fierce conviction that music was the only path he could walk. In 1960, he formed the Paramounts with a few school friends, including guitarist Robin Trower, who would later become a rock legend in his own right. The band quickly made waves in the South End area with a gritty American-style rhythm and blues sound. Unlike many young groups who merely copied the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, the Paramounts played music by Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, and James Brown, with skill, soul, and raw energy. In 1964, they released their first single, a cover of Poison Ivy, which entered the UK singles chart. That modest success was enough to land the Paramount's regular gigs as the opening act for the Rolling Stones, and Brian Jones even called them the best white R&B band in England. But time was not on their side. As public tastes shifted, the Paramounts began to lose ground. One by one, the members drifted away. By 1966, the band had disbanded. But Gary Brooker didn't give up. Rather than return to an ordinary life, he asked himself, if I can't play other people's music, why not write my own? That was when he met Keith Reid, a young poet with a haunted gaze and a way of writing lyrics like surreal literature. Reid didn't play music or sing, but he had a command of imagery and emotional depth, unlike anyone Brooker had met. They sat down together, tried collaborating. Keith wrote lyrics, Gary composed music. And within just a few weeks, they had created a song, strange, classical, hypnotic, that neither of them could have predicted would change their lives forever. That song was called A Whiter Shade of Pale. Before forming a new band, Brooker and Reid sent a demo of the track to Durham Records. It was recorded in a single day, featuring a Bach-inspired organ part, played by Matthew Fisher, and cryptic, dreamlike lyrics that no one really understood, but everyone was mesmerized by. When the song was released in May 1967, it shot to #1. Won on the UK charts for 6 consecutive weeks and spread like a global shockwave. Procol Harum was officially born, Brooker as lead singer, pianist, and primary composer. But few knew that this breakthrough wasn't the result of some master plan. It was a reward for the perseverance of a musician who had tasted loss, seen his first band fall apart, and still refused to quit. Gary Brooker's career didn't begin with noise and fame, but with quiet resolve. He didn't enter music as a chosen star. He got there on his own, through countless small gigs, early failures, and a belief that never wavered. If the music is true, people will listen. Career success. In May 1967, just days after its release, A Whiter Shade of Pale soared to #1, one in the UK. For 6 consecutive weeks, it didn't just top the charts, it occupied the minds and hearts of millions. And as the song spread across Europe, America, Australia, and Asia, the name Gary Brooker, the man who composed its melody and gave voice to its haunting verses, suddenly became a global phenomenon. What made A Whiter Shade of Pale so special wasn't just its Bach-tinged organ line or Keith Reid's surreal lyrics. It was Brooker's voice, deep, gravelly, yet imbued with a depth of emotion no one else at the time could reach. It felt like a confession from the soul, a prayer whispered in the rain, dissolving something hidden inside the listener, then cleansing it. The song quickly became a cultural icon. It was used in dozens of films, commercials, even weddings and funerals. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide, earned a place on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, and became an unforgettable part of a generation's collective memory. But Gary Brooker didn't rest on that success. With Procol Harum, he continued pushing musical boundaries, creating albums steeped in classical influences and philosophical themes, such as Shine On Brightly, 1968, featuring the epic In Held 'Twas an I, one of the earliest precursors of progressive rock. A Salty Dog, 1969, blending romantic balladry with maritime themes, where Brooker's voice felt like the lonely tale of a sailor adrift at sea. Home, 1970, and Broken Barricades, 1971, exploring themes of disillusionment, loss, and post-60s existential drift. Grand Hotel, 1973, a symphonic masterpiece marking Procol Harum's artistic peak. Between 1967 and 1977, Procol Harum became pioneers of art rock and symphonic rock, yet they didn't follow any trend. While Pink Floyd leaned into dreamscapes and Yes showcased virtuosity, Procol Harum, with Brooker at its core, chose pure emotion, sadness, nostalgia, quiet memories, and the melancholic beauty of being human. Brooker wasn't just the singer. He wrote music, arranged compositions, played piano, led the band, and on many tours, even handled logistics himself. Though the creative center, he always yielded the spotlight to the group. But ironically, that only made him shine more. After Procol Harum disbanded in 1977, Brooker launched a solo career, releasing albums like No More Fear of Flying, 1979, and collaborating with artists such as George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Bill Wyman. His voice remained in demand across both classical and rock concerts, carrying a kind of musical intellect that true musicians deeply respected. In 1991, Procol Harum reunited, and once again, Gary Brooker was its beating heart. The band released new albums, The Wells on Fire, Novum, and played major venues, from the Royal Albert Hall to open-air stages across Europe. What's remarkable is, Gary Brooker never changed. Over the years, he remained behind his piano with that same voice, now rougher yet richer, as if every song he sang had transformed from melody into living memory. In an industry increasingly driven by trends, Brooker, with Procol Harum, chose a quieter, more refined path, loyal to timeless artistic values. And because of that, he didn't just make songs, he created feelings that defy explanation and can only be felt with the heart. Personal life. In the world of rock, where fleeting romances and scandals often accompany the wail of electric guitars, Gary Brooker was a quiet exception. While his peers changed wives as often as they changed tour stops, he loved only one woman, Françoise Frankie Riedo, a Swiss-born woman he met in the early 1960s and married in 1968. That marriage lasted over half a century, without a hint of scandal, without a single sensational headline, and without the need for poetic declarations. It was steady, enduring, and loyal, just like the man himself. Frankie was never a public figure, nor did she ever share the stage with her husband. But she was present in every part of his life, from his earliest album recordings to his final tours. She was his backstage manager, his emotional anchor, and the home he returned to after the lights dimmed. Within music circles, she was affectionately called the copyright holder of Brooker's heart. The couple lived in a centuries-old estate in Surrey, a peaceful countryside in southern England. During years off the road, Brooker spent time gardening, raising animals, and fishing. In a rare interview, he once said, "To live with the one you love, do the work you love, and find peace in nature. That's the greatest luxury for an artist." They had no children, a personal choice they rarely spoke about, but one that never left a void in their lives. Frankie and Gary lived like two musicians sharing one composition. Not many dramatic crescendos, but harmonized down to every breath. In his final years, as Brooker battled illness, it was Frankie who cared for him each day, keeping the press at bay and shielding him from the noise of the outside world. Friends and colleagues alike described Gary Brooker with one word: kind. He didn't speak much, but he always listened. He never judged, but always stood for what was right. In an industry saturated with ego, Brooker stood out for his rare humility, in both his music and his life. That's why, even though he wasn't a media fixture, Gary Brooker held a firm place in fans' hearts for over 50 years. Because he didn't just write music for the world, he lived a life that never needed a second stage. And perhaps, for people like him, that quiet presence was the most powerful voice of all. Disputes, difficult times. Even as the man behind one of the greatest songs in pop history, Gary Brooker was not immune to the shadows cast by his own past glory, both literally and metaphorically. And more painfully still, the trouble came from someone who had helped create that triumph. Matthew Fisher, the organist on A Whiter Shade of Pale. In 2005, nearly 4 decades after the song's release, Fisher unexpectedly sued Brooker and the music publisher, demanding recognition as co-composer of the music. His argument, the organ intro, heavily influenced by Bach, was not a mere embellishment, but the very soul of the song's immortality. In 2006, the UK High Court agreed, ruling that Fisher was indeed a co-author and entitled to 40% of the copyright, though only from the date of the lawsuit onward. Gary Brooker didn't stay silent. He appealed, stating that Fisher had waited far too long to claim his share, and that the organ part, however beautiful, was added after the main melody had already been completed. The legal battle was long, bitter, and closely followed by the entire British music industry. While the final decision was somewhat of a compromise, Fisher was credited but not awarded retroactive royalties, Brooker couldn't hide his disappointment. In an interview, he once said, "I don't object to recognition." But music shouldn't become a battlefield for lawyers. When you play a song together, you believe your hearts are beating as one. And then suddenly, you need a courtroom to decide who truly felt it. The lawsuit left emotional scars and fractured relationships within Procol Harum. Though they continued to perform together afterward, something was lost, as one of Brooker's close friends put it. For an artist who valued emotional connection above all, being taken to court by a trusted collaborator was a pain that couldn't be measured in money. And it wasn't the only low note Brooker had to face. In his final years, his health began to decline. While he never publicly shared details, his family later confirmed he had cancer, with his condition deteriorating from 2021 onward. True to form, he stayed silent, seeking no sympathy, refusing to stop performing until his body simply could no longer carry on. The physical sorrow never dimmed his inner light. Even when entangled in legal disputes, even as illness wore him down, Brooker never lost his defining qualities. He remained free of bitterness, avoided blame, and never let go of his calm dignity as a gentleman of music. To Gary Brooker, even the falls were part of life's symphony. He didn't make music to conquer. He made it to connect. And even when the song that made him famous seemed to turn against him, he chose to stay at the piano and sing, guided by integrity and the voice of an artist who never stopped believing in beauty. Legacy and influence. Gary Brooker was never a name constantly splashed across the media. He didn't dominate the charts year after year, nor did he put on smoke-filled, spotlight-drenched shows like other rock legends. But one thing remains undeniable. His music lives on, resonating in the hearts of those who lived through youth, who loved, who hurt, and who longed to be understood by a melody when words failed them. Brooker's greatest legacy isn't a list of albums or sales figures. It's the irreplaceable emotion his voice evoked. When he sang A Whiter Shade of Pale, listeners didn't hear just a singer, they heard themselves. That song no longer belonged solely to Procol Harum. It became part of the world's cultural memory. It echoed through films, The Big Chill, Breaking the Waves, The Boat That Rocked, in commercials, at funerals, at weddings, in every life moment where language proved inadequate. To critics and musicians, Brooker was considered a foundational figure in classical progressive rock, not in the technical virtuoso sense of Yes or King Crimson, but in the way he blended classical music, poetry, and modern rock. Albums like Shine On Brightly, A Salty Dog, and Grand Hotel were likened to symphonies of their era, with Brooker as the conductor, guiding emotion through piano and a voice rich with soul. His influence extended far beyond Procol Harum. Gary Brooker was a respected collaborator with music's greats. He recorded and performed with George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Kate Bush, Bill Wyman, and Ringo Starr. Among musicians, he was known as the man who never sought the spotlight, but always made the song better just by being in it. Kate Bush once described his voice as a door. You open it, and there's both the sky and the abyss. In 2003, Brooker was appointed MBE Member of the Order of the British Empire for his contributions to music and charity. Though never one to advertise it, he was an active participant in fundraising concerts, church performances, hospital gigs, and countless community events. To his fans, he embodied kindness in artistry, not only technically gifted, but also morally grounded in an industry often ruled by ego. Many younger artists looked up to him, not to learn how to become famous, but to learn how to become a true artist, one who lives for music, not for fame. When he passed away in 2022, tributes from The Guardian, Rolling Stone, NME, and others didn't just recount his career. They praised the integrity of his artistic journey. On British radio, A Whiter Shade of Pale played on loop like a farewell ritual. And to millions, it wasn't just a song, it was a piece of their inner lives, sung on their behalf by a man who never tried to be a legend, and yet became one anyway. Final years. In the twilight of his life, when most of his peers had retreated from the spotlight or faded into obscurity, Gary Brooker continued to perform. Quietly, without fanfare, like a guardian tending to an old flame, keeping it alive with nothing but the fire in his own heart. Even past the age of 70, he toured across Europe and North America with Procol Harum. At those concerts, audiences didn't cheer for pyrotechnics or elaborate lighting. They came simply to hear him sing A Whiter Shade of Pale one more time, as if to hear the voice of their youth once again. Though his voice had deepened, sometimes rasped with age, every time he sang, the room fell silent. He never needed to shout. What he offered was already powerful enough to stir the soul. In 2017, he released Novum, Procol Harum's final album after 14 years of silence. Tinged with reflection and the passage of time, the album proved Brooker had never run out of ideas. He wrote with the wisdom of experience, sang with a heart that had known both light and shadow, and played piano as if each key were an extension of himself. Though he still appeared in public, few knew that Gary Brooker was battling cancer. He never disclosed his illness, never sought sympathy, true to his nature, humble, private, and always letting music speak for him. During treatment, he lived quietly at his Surrey home with his wife, Frankie, who had stood by his side from the beginning to the very end. On February 19, 2022, Gary Brooker passed away at age 76. He died peacefully, in the very place where he had written many of the most poignant songs of his life. His death was announced by Procol Harum with a simple line: "He was the light, not only in music, but in all of our lives." The music world was stunned. Artists like Eric Clapton, Peter Frampton, and Brian May paid tribute. The BBC replayed A Whiter Shade of Pale as if it were a prayer. On local radio stations, listeners called in to share memories of the first time they heard that voice, in the car, on the night of a first goodbye, or in the middle of an unforgettable summer. There was no public funeral, no towering monument, no thousand-strong lines of mourners, but everywhere, in every recording, every piano, every soul once moved by his music, Gary Brooker lived on. He didn't just leave this world, he became part of it, through notes that never truly fade away. Gary Brooker never tried to become a legend. He didn't live like a star, wasn't loud like a musical revolutionary, and didn't belong to any particular movement. He simply wrote music, sang, and quietly walked away, as if what he left behind was enough of a farewell. And that, precisely, is what made him different. In a world of art increasingly obsessed with spectacle and noise, Brooker held firm to a simple belief. Music is emotion, not performance. And he remained loyal to that belief until the end. From the days he delivered newspapers after his father's death, to the moment he became the voice forever tied to one of the most timeless songs of the 20th century. A Whiter Shade of Pale isn't a song about Gary Brooker, but it may be the most vivid portrait of his soul, melancholic, gentle, and impossible to pin down. Like the man himself, the song needs no explanation. It only needs to be listened to. He lived a quiet life with the only woman he ever loved. No scandals, no hunger for luxury. When sued by a bandmate over the rights to his most iconic song, he didn't respond with bitterness. He simply said, "Music shouldn't be a battlefield." When illness came, he didn't complain. He just sat behind the piano, playing his final notes as if they were the first of a brand new symphony. And then he left, just as he had lived, quietly, but never to be forgotten. To his fans, Gary Brooker was more than the voice of Procol Harum. He was the artist who reminded the world that sometimes a single piano note in the silence holds more power than 1,000 lyrics. That a life lived without noise, if lived with sincerity, art, and love, is enough to become a legend. Have you ever heard a whiter shade of pale at a meaningful moment in your life? Share that memory with us, because perhaps Gary Brooker's music reached you in a way you never expected. If you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can meet again on the next journey, where music is not just heard, but felt and told with the heart.